Hey everyone, I'm Joe and today it's finally time for me to do a book review and discussion on the Dune Saga by Frank Herbert. This should be relatively spoiler free as far as the plot of the books go. I'm going to discuss ideas from the books however, which could be considered spoiler in very slight ways, but it really should be fairly insignificant because I'm talking about them in a general sense rather than any very particular items. The Dune Saga is comprised of Dune, Dune Messiah, Children of Dune, God Emperor of Dune, Heretics of Dune, and finally, Chapter House Dune. And overall, 6 books, and I really like them all. I preferred the first overall because of it's the first, it's more original, and there's something about it. I mean, obviously it's the first one I've read, of course, but the other books are perfectly good, and they really do bring things together really well as the overall saga continues. Dune is often considered both science fiction and fantasy, and it's for a good reason. The science fiction, in particular, is space opera, and the fantasy is almost like a high fantasy or epic fantasy. And the reason for this, and indeed what I always class Dune as, is that it's science fiction that reads like fantasy. It has the technology in it, but it also has a lot of mysticism and a lot of things that are almost fantasy-like in their scope and their feel. So it is properly science fiction and fantasy SFF. It's not one or the other, it's fully both. Frank Herbert sadly died 1 year after the 6th book, Chapter House Dune, was published. The Dune Saga itself has been expanded upon with a further 2 books which sort of continue on the plot line by Frank Herbert's son, Brian Herbert, and Kevin J. Anderson. There are also a series of other books to do with the various families and the various things that are mentioned throughout the 6 main Dune books, because Frank Herbert had extensive notes on what he wanted to write, and Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson have expanded upon them, and indeed there are still more books set within the Dune universe to be published in the next few years as far as I'm aware. I haven't read any of the other Dune universe books other than the Frank Herbert ones, so I'm not going to be talking about them in this video. First I'll do a little synopsis of the first book, Dune. Dune is the nickname of a planet whose proper name is called Arrakis. This is unsurprisingly a desert world, almost entirely desert. Sort of think of a sort of Arabia type environment, and this world is very important to the overall Dune universe because of one particular substance, and that is something called melange, or the spice, which is a substance that you take and it heightens your awareness and your senses to levels you can't obtain any other way. And one of the guilds, indeed the guild, the Spacefaring Guild, needs spice or melange to pilot their ships. They have the monopoly on space travel, interstellar space travel, so Dune is critically important. The Dune universe has got an emperor above everybody else, who's elected there essentially, and it's also partially hereditary, and below him there are a series of large houses or families. One of those families, called the Harkonnens, are in control of Dune. At the very start of the book, actually technically it's right before the book starts, they are, due to political sort of intrigue and wrangling, have to give up control of Arrakis and sort of move on. And another family, the Atreides family, moves onto the planet to sort of take control and to manage spice production, and this is a very important position and indeed makes the Atreides line like a big family again. However, because of what the melange or spice actually means and how critical it is, there's a lot of people that basically do not want the Atreides to do well with it, although they would prefer the Atreides to be not alive, frankly. And indeed that is what the book is about. It is a sort of there's a bit of political intrigue, And more important than that though, it is to do with the three main characters of the Atreides family, which is the Duke Leto, the Lady Jessica and their son Paul. Paul, or Muad'Dib as he becomes known later in the book, is a very important character. He gets to know the native people, and I'm not going to say too much more because frankly I will give away spoilers, but it's all to do with control of melange and sort of like the infighting between the Harkonnens and the Atreides. The further books, the further 5 books, continue this story on in drastically different ways, and indeed they do have a bit of a different feel to them because some of them are on different worlds and they follow completely different character sets, although they do follow the Atreides line, and some of the characters from the first Dune book are in the other books in various forms. And I really can't say any more because, and frankly I don't want to, because it's so complicated and so many twists and turns and plots interweaving that it's just too complicated for me to talk about in one go. One thing I'm just going to quickly expand upon is the feel of the books that changes as the books go on, which I've said. This to start with seems almost a bad thing because it changes in a slightly odd way and it does take a bit of getting used to, but it does get better. Thankfully I like the first 2 books. The third and the fourth I didn't like as much, Children and God Emperor, and then Heretics and Chapter House brings it back up a bit again because it goes off a little bit in a odd tangent, but then it brings it back and starts tying things together quite well, and it feels more like the original Dune, and there's just something about the overall saga and indeed the final 2 books that really bring everything together really well. And the further Dune books of course expand upon all sorts of aspects that I mentioned very briefly, some of them in the first Dune book, like the Bene Gesserit, the Talaxu, and all sorts of interesting ideas that get linked together and get really expanded upon, and there are quite a few surprises that I really, were surprising because I thought they were going to go one way. I thought yes, it must go that way, and then it's actually not, it's nothing like it, which is actually a nice thing. So that's it as far as the plot goes. Now I'm going to talk about some of the ideas in it. One of the ideas, and especially in the first book and then in the later books, especially in God Emperor, it talks about the formation of religion and what religion is on a fairly fundamental level. Is religion believing in something greater than yourself? And if so, what is that thing that is greater than yourself? Is it a person? Is it an idea or a concept? Or is it just a better way of life? And it explores it in different ways and sort of goes at it in different ways, and it is really interesting to think about and indeed to read. Another concept is the individual effect on society. That is either one person or a very small group of people's effect and what they can do and influence on a very large society. Now the main character from Dune is probably Paul really. The newer characters are significant but not as much as Paul. And what Paul achieves in the first book and indeed his legacy and the far-reaching influences that he has in the other books is very, very significant, and it gets explored in really interesting ways on how he can influence not just the way of life but even religion again and day-to-day life of every single person and why he's affecting them, even though sometimes he doesn't even want to affect them. He just happens that it's sort of forced upon him and he doesn't know how to not influence people. Going along with this is the religion effect on society and the ecology and political ramifications thereof. What does religion have to do with the politics and the ecology of a world? How does it affect the world, and how can it help it run or indeed destroy it? Obviously religion in our world is often used as an excuse for people just to basically let out their aggression on one another and murder each other, and then say, it's in the name of a god, when it's actually not. It's just because they're extremely violent in nature and they want an excuse for it. And indeed, that's what these books are exploring. It's a case of why and how we use religion to do things to each other, and frankly the fairly unpleasant effects that can have in most cases. Also the political control and the way the political sort of establishment and the governments interact with religion. In this is brought into a fairly extreme way. I'm not going to talk about how, but it is. And it's how does a political institution, indeed the emperor and everything that goes along with it, how do they interact with a religion and the way they interact with one another to sort of form this society and indeed affect the society across the whole of the Dune galaxy. And these effects are profound and really interesting to think about, and I'm not going to talk about them because if I talk about them then you may not think about them in the same way. It may not occur to you yourself then. It could sort of spoil things, frankly. And the last main concept I'm going to mention is the clash of ideologies in the book. There are many different ideologies, from different various families and characters. Of course, the Harkonnens and the Atreides, they both think in a very different way, and they use people in a different way, and it's the clash of these ideas and these differences. It's how do you resolve conflict and ideally try to avoid conflict in the first place? Do you try to talk about it? Do you manipulate others for things to just apparently go the way you want? Or what do you want basically from your world, and the different ways you can go about this. So that's pretty much it really. I'm not going to say anything more because I don't want to give away spoilers, and I think if I say every idea and every concept that is in the books, then there won't be anything for you to sort of realise yourself. You'll already be expecting multiple different things, so it will be less interesting and less thought-provoking than it definitely was to me. I love these books, and whilst there's a fair bit to them between the 6 books, they are well worth reading. Basically, if you like the first book, Dune, then I would try the second book. If you like the second, then you'll definitely want to read the other 4 then, because it expands upon things in a really interesting way. Although the middle 2 books do, again, as I mentioned earlier, slightly dip, I think, in terms of quality. I thought they were a little bit dull, frankly. They were nonetheless really, really interesting, and they still pulled things together from the first 2 into the last 2, and they're really overall really worthwhile to read, and I really like them. So if you've read the Dune books or you would like to read them, then please leave a comment below. All the various links to my social media and things will also be in the description box below as well. And if you want to talk to me about Dune or the further Dune universe, then please feel free to leave a comment, because I'm always happy to talk about Dune. I love Dune, I really do. So comments about Dune is a good thing in my eyes. Anyway, with that said, that is it for this video. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you another day. Bye for now.